Okay, today I'm holding up a ransom note. And I have a reason for doing it because I want to give you a very scary but true story from the FBI files. And this didn't happen that many years ago. It says, please, the ransom in a brown paper bag. Wait, so our instructions wait for our instructions, tell nobody. And this is made out of cutout letters, so you can't identify the handwriting and you cannot identify the uh, the fingerprints. Okay, would somebody hand me that wand over there, please? I want to turn on the air conditioner because you're getting hot. But I want to tell you something. If you were, yeah, right there, you see that? Hand that to me. If you were Barbara, I'm just going to give her first name. If you were Barbara, you'd really be hot. Can I tell you why? And when I say hot, I don't mean attractive. I mean hot. The kidnappers did not want anybody to know where the body was, the body of the girl they had kidnapped. So they buried her alive. They buried her alive. You know what I mean? They actually constructed a capsule, a coffin, and they put the girl in it with a battery-operated light and a little motor running the air tube so she wouldn't suffocate. But above the casket lid was all this dirt. And she did not know if she would ever be dug up or if the police would ever find her or if the ransom note would be paid or what was going to happen. She was buried alive. Now, can you imagine that? I have claustrophobia. That would be, to me, really hell. And it was for her. What had happened was her father happened to be rich. Now, if you're well-to-do and you go overseas, you could very well be kidnapped. Did you know that? How many know that? Kidnapping is a big business in Mexico. When you cross that Texas border into Mexico, you're taking your life in your own hands. Because if you look like an American and they think you have money, you could easily be kidnapped for ransom. But this was a very gruesome kidnapping. Because the guy that did it had worked on it for months, constructing this capsule, figuring out how to get air down the air tube, having a battery for the light, so there would be a light in the casket, figuring out exactly where he was going to bury her, and then the abduction itself, which he banged on the motel door. Now, the reason she was in the motel is she was ill. She had a fever. Her mother had flown to where she was, the college where she was, and the mother was taking care of her. And she was in bed in the motel. Bang, 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 bang. Somebody's knocking at the door. She goes to the door. She didn't open the door. She said, "Who is it?" And the person said, "It's the police. There's been a problem out here. You have to open up." When she opened the door, and by the way, don't ever open the door for anybody. If it's the police, let them worry about how to get in. Do they have can they really identify themselves? You don't want to open the door. But anyway, she opened the door. First mistake. When she did, the guy and his accomplice burst in, and they had some kind of ether or something on a rag, and they threw it over the mother's nose, and she immediately went unconscious. So now they got her out of the way. The girl is screaming, but they threaten her life. They gag her, whatever. They get her in the car, and they take off. Now she's kidnapped. And they go to this remote place, and they tell her, if you cooperate, you will live. But if you don't, you will die. She said, "No, I don't want to be buried alive. No, I can't stand that. No, please, anything but that. My father will give you money." And so what they did was they had a little sign that said "kidnapped." They put it on her chest. She's lying in the casket. Then he takes a picture. He says, "Smile for the camera." She couldn't smile. She finally smiled. Now he's got a picture of her smiling and alive with the word kidnapped on a piece of paper on her chest. And he's going to use that to show the father that if he gives them money, he will get his daughter back alive. He hopes. And so what follows is a series of very complicated instructions on how to do the drop to give the ransom money. It had to be $25,000 in used bills that were not in consecutive serial number. And it had to be in a certain kind of case. And the case was described very minutely. And then they had to wait for instructions as to where to make the drop, exactly where to make the drop. Well, this was very complicated. And the story is quite complicated. But the point I want to make is that while all of this complicated thing is going on, the girl was buried alive. See, you're not getting it at all. You're not following me at all. You have to identify with this girl. She's buried alive. How many have claustrophobia here? Anybody? You can't stand to be in elevators or whatever? You know what I'm talking about? She was buried alive. And a ransom note had to be paid. And if it wasn't paid, she was going to die buried alive. There's a short story, a horror short story by Edgar Allan Poe on this very subject. In fact, I think there's 2 of them that he wrote on this very subject, the horror of being buried alive and waiting for someone to bring the ransom note. Now, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm saying now. While she was buried alive, she was not down there saying, well, you know, this isn't that bad. I enjoy it, actually. The air is nice, and the light is nice. And you know what? I don't think I need any kind of ransom. My dad can keep his money, you know. He doesn't need to lose any sleep over this. The ransom isn't immaterial because you know what? I sort of enjoy where I am. It's not so bad in this little cramped casket, buried alive. I'm not going to make a big fuss about it. I don't need a ransom. Do you think that's what she thought? Do you think that's what she thought? How many think that's what she thought? No, she did not think that. Now you see, your parents are downstairs taking an ESL class, and you're up here listening to me. And I hope you're listening to me. You're partially listening, a little bored, as if this has nothing to do with you. But I want you to know that this right here that I'm holding is really a ransom note. The entire Bible is a ransom note. This is what God requires. And he's going to tell you exactly what he requires. And then in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, the Moshiach, who's going to make the ransom payment, says the Bar Enosh has to make a ransom for many. The Bar Enosh came not to minister to anyone, but not to be ministered to by anyone, but to minister to everyone, and to make a ransom for many. That's what it says. So when the devil tells you, you know, you don't need to come today, you sleep late. You don't need to read this book. It's not for you. You know, read another book. Read something else. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You don't need it. You don't need it. Everything's fine. What you're really doing is you're saying it's not so bad in this little casket. I don't really need a ransom. I don't need a ransom note. I don't need Dr. Goebel to tell me about a ransom. I don't need to read that big, thick book and find out what the ransom is and how I could get the ransom paid. This is your problem. The Hebrew word is padut. It means a ransom payment. It says, For God requires it. It is the blood that makes an atonement for the soul. So we're talking about a lamb that has to redeem you out of Egypt. And then the Moshiach, it says he went as a lamb to the slaughter. And then you have to wonder, what does he mean when he says, the Bar Enosh, that means Daniel 7:13 or 14, came to make a ransom for many. Who are the many? How can I be among the many? What is this talking about? This is what you have to ask. This is extremely important. Listen, when I was a little boy, I was playing hide and seek with my brother, and we had this casket-like, it was a clothes hamper, but it was big enough for a child to get in. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to hide from my brother. He'll never find me. I'm going to get in that clothes hamper. And I got in it, and I closed the lid, and I got real quiet, and I could hear actually my brother walking around looking for me. How many know when I say that sometimes a sibling can be a little bit masochistic? Now, some of you are only children, and you don't have a brother or a sister. But how many know what I'm talking about? If I say that a brother or a sister can be a little masochistic, well, I should say sadistic. Well, anyway, at one point I remember I sneezed, and then I could feel the pressure of somebody sitting on the lid, and I knew it was my brother. And I said, "Okay, Nick, okay, please, you found me, you won the game, hide and seek, you're the winner, get up." And he went, he wasn't going to get up. And I said, "Come on, I can't stand it down here." And I started pushing at the walls and everything. And my brother was 7 years older than me. I couldn't lift him off that lid. So then he said, "I'm not getting up. I'm not getting up." I said, "Well, you got to get up." He said, "Not till Mama comes home." Well, Mama wasn't going to come home for several hours. And I began to sweat. This terror came over me. And you know what? I still have claustrophobia to this day. And I'm praying that you will get a little spiritual claustrophobia. Yes. And that you will want somebody to deliver you. Because in the outer darkness, it's probably very much like that. You're isolated. You're alone. Forever. And there's no one to help you. There's no one to ransom you. It's too late. It's appointed unto men once to die and then the judgment. Now this is extremely scary. I'm talking about the Bible as a ransom note. Have you ever thought of the Bible that way? Listen, this is the New Creation Bible for Muslims. And I'm gonna read this one little passage, if I can find it here real quick. It's one little passage, and this is what it says. Listen carefully. In my heart there is a masjid, a small prayer room, small